Hello everyone, I'm almost 99% positive that the reason you clicked on this video is because you thought, oh my god, Brayden, I totally want to know the top 10 most anticipated games that flopped. And well, you're in the right place. Today I'll be sharing my personal, yes personal, don't take it any offense to this, top 10 worst game flops that were thought to be amazing games. And some of these games I didn't even know about until I researched this topic. To keep it simple, I'll list each game, a gist of the game, the hype the game got, the reality of the situation, and a dummy explanation for people like me. And then a fun fact to tie it all in, and on a good note. Starting off the list at the number 10 spot, we got The Day Before. Set in a post pandemic New Fortune City on the US East Coast, The Day Before was supposed to be an extraction shooter with MMO elements. Players must scavenge for resources like food, water, and medicine while managing hunger and thirst meters, fighting against infected zombies and other players to extract gear back to a hub colony. But here's the truth of the matter. Trailers showed a massive open world zombie survival game like The Last of Us meets GTA, with supposed incredible graphics, but fairy tales are just that, fairy tales. What we actually got was a scam. The game that launched was a buggy, empty shooting game with no survival features. The studio shut down just 4 days after release. To dumb it down for plebeians like myself, this is like buying a movie ticket only for it to roll the credits the minute the movie came on. It's all a nothing burger of a game meant to get people to buy the game and hoping that they won't refund it within nanoseconds of loading it up. The Day Before wasn't actually planned to be an MMO. At least that's what the developers thought. The developers themselves didn't know they were making an MMO. They were building a small extraction shooter and only found out the game was being marketed as a massive open world MMO when they watched the public trailer. Now, closing up the number 10 spot, let's move on to number 9. Can you guess what it is? I'll give you a couple moments. If you guessed Concord, you're right. But to those that want to be cool and say they, quote unquote, knew it, stop lying to yourself, man. Concord was a 5v5 sci fi hero shooter where players control free gunners. They're basically mercenaries with distinct roles such as anchor, breacher, and tactician. The gameplay revolves around objective based modes like Trophy Hunt, a game of collecting tokens from fallen enemies, and area control, emphasizing team composition and character specific abilities. Sony reportedly spent hundreds of millions and 8 years building the future of multiplayer shooters, but it launched to virtually zero players and was shut down in just 2 weeks. The character designs were disliked, and it cost $40 in a market of free games, especially when that market includes Valorant, Overwatch, and Marvel Rivals, all objectively better hero shooters for the crisp price of 0 buckaroos, not counting the microtransactions for skins, but you get it. Imagine putting up a burger stand next to a Big Brother Ramsay. He's giving away free food, and you charge $40 for a burger that tastes okay, but looks weird. Nobody buys it, and you go bankrupt in 14 days. That's Concord. If you want to be realistic, then it's a $16,000 burger. With an estimated budget of $400 million and only 25,000 copies sold, Sony roughly spent $16,000 for every single player who bought the game. It generated less revenue than Golem, which is a game that honestly should be on this list, but I took it out because it's so obvious. And they ended up giving a full refund to the few that bought the game, so they really didn't even make any money because I doubt anyone's buying microtransactions on a dead game. Moving away from that monstrosity hero shooter, let's go to number 8 spot, Cyberpunk 2077. Yes, I know what you're thinking. Cyberpunk is amazing! And you're right, which is why I'm talking about the launch of the game. The game promised to be the most immersive, next generation RPG ever made, starring Keanu Reeves. Keanu Reeves! In reality, it was so broken on the PS4 and Xbox One that it was unplayable. Sony actually kicked it off their store. On launch, it had T-posing characters, missing AI, and constant crashes. It's like you bought a brand new Ferrari, it looks beautiful in the brochure, but when you pick it up, the engine is missing, the doors fall off, and it explodes when you drive over 20 miles per hour. Now, for this next part, I'm probably gonna have to bleep most of it, but here goes nothing. The density patch. At launch, a loot table bug caused random junk items to spawn as high tier loot. This resulted in the streets of Night City being literally paved with Sir John Falstaff weapons, a melee weapon shaped like a toy. CD Projekt Red had to release a patch note that specifically promised to, quote unquote, reduce the amount of found in the world. Going on to the number 7 spot, we got No Man's Sky. Yes, I know, another banger. My response is still the same. I'm talking specifically about the launch of the game. No Man's Sky is an open universe survival game built on procedural generation, allowing players to explore an infinite number of unique planets. The core gameplay involves mining resources with a multi-tool, cataloging alien flora and fauna, trading, and upgrading starships to travel toward the center of the galaxy. All people could talk about was a universe with infinite planets where you can do anything, meet other players, and fight in massive space battles. In reality, you couldn't see other players, even when standing in the same spot, and there was almost nothing to do but shoot rocks. Though they fixed this years later, the launch remains a disaster. The developers promised a 5-course meal with steak, lobster, and caviar, but the waiter brought you the last meal of last meals, a single plate with one frozen pea on it. That's what it's like. To be a little fair, we have to talk about the Christmas flood. In 2013, the entire Hello Games studio was destroyed by a flood on Christmas Eve. They lost PCs, furniture, and concept art. To make matters worse, they were in a designated flood zone, so they had zero insurance and had to rebuild the game's code from backups. To pick things up, let's move on to number 6, Anthem. Anthem is a third-person loot shooter set in a sci-fi fantasy world. Players pilot Javelin exosuits like the Ranger, Colossus, Storm, and Interceptor, each offering different combat styles and flight capabilities. Combat focuses on a primer and detonator combat system to inflict massive damage on enemies and large bosses. We expected a lot from the creators of Mass Effect, so we thought the concept that you get to fly around in Iron Man suits in a constantly changing world was all but inevitable fire waiting to come. In reality, the flying was fun for 5 minutes. The game had no story, terrible loot, and it broke your fucking console. The developers didn't even know what the game was supposed to be until the end. Like, how does that even happen? And to dumb it down, it's like you got a super cool superhero suit for Christmas, but your wife says, in a wifely manner, that you're only allowed to fly in circles in the backyard and shoot the same stump over and over again. The flying mechanics widely considered the only good part of the game, and for some, the only reason they bought the game was actually removed during development because it broke the level design. It was only added back weeks before a major demo because an EA executive played the build without flying and told the team it was boring. For number 5, we're moving on to a beloved movie series that has games tied to it. Can you guess what it is? It's the Shrek game from the Xbox, the original Xbox. Just kidding, it's Alien Colonial Marines. Shrek could be on this list, but once again, I'm not a robot and can't pick every bad game in existence. Alien Colonial Marines is a squad-based first-person shooter that serves as a direct sequel to the film Aliens. I mean, it's kind of obvious. Players control Corporal Winter and explore locations like the USS, I'm not going to say this right, Sulaco, and the ruins of Hadley's Hope on LV-426. Using pulse rifles and motion trackers to fight waves of xenomorphs and Weyland Yutani mercenaries. I hope I said that right. It was supposed to be a terrifying shooter that looked exactly like the movies, with smart aliens that would hunt you and adapt. But we eventually realized the graphics were ugly and the aliens were brain dead as they would just walk into walls. Which, fun fact, a fan later found out the AI was broken because of a single typo in the code. So on right, Tether instead of Tether. Buying this game is like watching a trailer for a scary movie. But when you went to the theater, it was just a puppet show that had puppets talking to walls the entire time. Not very fun. Which is why we're moving on to number 4, Duke Nukem Forever. Duke Nukem Forever, following one banger of a game, Duke Nukem, is a first-person shooter where players control an action hero trying to save Earth from an alien invasion. The game features an ego health bar that regenerates, interactive environmental objects like whiteboards and toilets, and outlandish weapons including the Shrink Ray and Freeze Ray. It had been in development for an astronomical 15 years. It was supposed to be the greatest shooter ever made, but by the time it came out, the graphics looked 10 years old, the jokes were cringeworthy, and the gameplay was boring. It's like waiting 15 years to see Spider-Man and you get Spider-Man. Fun fact, before it was beaten by Beyond Good and Evil 2, this game held the Guinness World Record for the longest development period for the video game project. 14 years and 44 days. 14 years and 44 days. That is a crazy amount of time to waste. It was announced when Bill Clinton was president and released when Barack Obama was in office, just to give a frame of reference. Now, this game didn't take nearly as long to complete, but it's still one piece of crap game. Number 3 is taken by Mighty Number 9. This is a 2D side-scrolling platformer in which players control the robot Beck. The primary mechanic is the accelerant with an X, dash, which allows Beck to ram into weakened enemies to absorb their Zell, this game's energy, granting temporary buffs and the ability to copy the weapons of defeated boss robots, which, let's be honest, sounds like an amazing game on paper. Because the creator of Mega Man asked fans for money to make a spiritual successor, and managed to raise $4 million doing so, people thought it would be the best game ever, and can you blame them? But that spell was soon broken and we were pushed back into reality with the launch of the game. The graphics looked like a cheap mobile game with the explosions literally looking like pepperoni pizzas. The creator infamously said it's better than nothing, which isn't really something you want to hear when it raised $4 million for a pile of poop. Not only did a world-famous chef charge you $100 to make you a gourmet pizza, he also took your money, bought a frozen pizza from the dollar store, microwaved it, and said, hey, it's better than starving. And fun fact, the trailer was so bad that the game's own CEO publicly disowned it, blaming the publisher. Now, if you think that's bad and disappointing, then I'm sorry to burst your bubble, because sitting at the number 2 spot is 1982 E.T. the Extraterrestrial. If you don't already know and or like me wasn't born in that era, then you should know it was an adventure game where the player guides E.T. across several screens to find 3 pieces of an interplanetary telephone. Gameplay involved levitating out of pits, avoiding an FBI agent, and a scientist who tried to capture the player, and obviously collecting Reese's Pieces to restore energy. If we're to be blunt, this game's hype didn't come from well-received trailers or any real tangible promises told by developers. It came from the fact that it's a game based on the biggest movie in the world. Atari thought it would sell millions no matter what, and so did everyone else. The speculative story was that it was a cash grab, because the developer was given only 6 weeks to make it, and usually it takes months to do so. On release, the game was a confusing mess where you would constantly fall into pits. It was so bad, they buried millions of unsold copies in a landfill. Reportedly, Howard Scott Warshaw the programmer who made the game in just 5 weeks, actually showed it to Steven Spielberg before release. Spielberg played it and reportedly told Warshaw, "That's outstanding." Which kinda reminds me of that whole thing in How I Met Your Mother where they, slight spoiler, talked about seals of approval and that Marshall gives the worst seals of approval and is a little bit like Spielberg because he gives everyone and everything a seal of approval like a true man from Minnesota. Sorry, Minnesota. I apologize for the cringe. Now moving on to the number 1 spot. It's Daikatana. I know, such an amazing game. Who am I kidding? I didn't even know the game existed and can barely pronounce the name correctly and fast. Daikatana is a first-person shooter centered on time travel. The protagonist, Hiro Miyamoto, travels through 4 distinct time periods: futuristic Japan, ancient Greece, Dark Ages Norway, and near-future San Francisco, to retrieve a magical sword. A key mechanic is the management of 2 AI sidekicks, Superfly and Mikiko, who fight alongside the player. The designer of Doom, John Romero, was a rock star. Ads literally said John Romero's about to make you his bitch. And yet, to make us that the game had to be delayed for years, looked ugly, and your AI sidekicks constantly died or got stuck indoors. It honestly feels like the cliche of the coolest kid in school inviting everyone to the party of the century that he bragged about for months, but when he got there, he just stood in the corner yelling at his mom while the music skipped. Now, if you think that's the worst part, then you should probably know that the AI sidekicks, Superfly Johnson and Mikiko, were critical to the game, meaning you lost if they died. You'd think they'd at least be functional, but they were programmed so poorly they would just regularly drown themselves or refuse to walk through doors. Players spent more time babysitting them than shooting enemies. They should really rename it to Babysitting Simulator, am I right? No? Okay. Well, anyways, that's my top 10 list for games that flopped at release after being hyped up so much. If you enjoy this type of content, please think about leaving a like and subscribing, and maybe leave a comment on anything else I should talk about. As always, have a blessed day from the boy in the South.